Today I'm going to share with you how you, the person watching this video, you are powerful enough to change the world all on your own with one act of love and kindness. You are powerful enough to change the world. How is this possible? And how can you do that? How can I do that? Watch to find out. We have another kitty friend with us today. This is Storm, otherwise known as Floofy. She is 2 years old, and as my daughter likes to say, she's an angsty teenager. One of the memories that stands out to me from when I was a little girl is when my mom and dad took my siblings and I along on a trip to deliver a Thanksgiving meal, a box of Thanksgiving food like stuffing and canned yams and whatever, on the porches of people who could not afford Thanksgiving dinner. The magic I felt in that moment has stayed with me my entire life. When I look back over my life, very few moments compare to those moments in which I have selflessly given something to another, no matter how small, no matter what was in it for me or who may have been watching, but simply because I wanted to participate in the joy of giving. Most of the time when we give, no matter how subtle, there's a little bit of ego benefit when we're able to get past all of that and give simply for the sake of spreading joy, experiencing the joy of giving, making someone's day better, self-expressing a beautiful creation and offering it to the world. A new level of magic happens, right? A new level of consciousness is reached. And I've come to understand over the last several years of studying near-death experience accounts and spiritual paths and teachings that there is enough power and magic and pure divine consciousness contained within one simple altruistic act of service to ensure that the entire population of the world will become enlightened. One true altruistic act of love and service is enough to enlighten the entire world. And in this video, I'm going to share with you why. When I first started studying near-death experiencers, one of the first stories that came across my path that was extraordinarily life-changing for me was that of Howard Storm. And my very favorite part of his story is where he's sharing his conversation that he had with Jesus when Jesus told him that he had to come back to Earth. And I'm going to share that with you right here.
I'd love to have you talk a little bit about your conversation with Jesus when you asked him what he wanted you to do when you came back to Earth.
When he was convincing me that I needed to come back here, I was like, well, if I were to come back to this world, what would you want me to do? And he said, I want you to love the person you're with. And I said, okay, great. But what do you want me to do? And he said, I want you to love the person that you're with. And I said, yeah, I understand, but I want to do something. And I started going off on this, how I'd build him a shrine and, make him famous and stuff like that. This is all very ridiculous in retrospect, but it made sense to me at the time. And he said, I don't want you to do that. I don't need a shrine. I don't want you to go off on some big project. I just want you to love the person you're with. I said, what good will that do? And he said, it'll change the world. He said, this is God's plan. And that shut me up.
As you can see in this clip, Jesus told Howard that if he came back to Earth and loved the person that he was with, that was enough to change the world. One person loving the person next to them is enough to change the world. And this phrase, love the person you're with, has become a well-known phrase in the near-death experience community now because of its simple, profound power. And Howard Storm is not the only one who's been told this. Multiple near-death experiencers are told something like this, that if you choose to go back into your earthly life and live it from a place of genuine love, you choosing to go back into your life and living that way is enough to change the course of future global events. When I first heard it, there was the ring of truth, but I didn't quite understand how it would be enough. Like one person, I understand the domino effect and all of that. Like you go out and love someone and that person loves somebody and that person loves somebody else, and it can go on and on and on. The butterfly effect, right? But there's also a lot of people doing a lot of negative things in the world too that also have a ripple effect. The next time I ran across this idea was when I was studying a book called A Course in Miracles. This is a channel text and one of the very few channel texts that I actually take seriously and think is legitimate. This text claims to be channeled by Jesus Christ as an attempt to correct the teachings of Jesus in the Bible that have been misunderstood. And it teaches consciousness transformation through forgiveness and a shift of perception from fear to love. This shift in perception allows somebody to see through the illusions of the world of separation that we've created in our minds and see the truth that the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven, is spread out upon the earth, as it says in the Gospel of Thomas, that this world is actually heaven. We're living in heaven here. But because we believe ourselves to be separate from each other and separate from source, separate from God, we project our own illusions of being separate, weak, lacking, powerless upon the world and create an illusory world of suffering and death. And then this course is designed to help people undergo a transition into seeing through a love-based lens, through the power of forgiving our illusions rather than judging sin, forgiving our illusions and misunderstandings. But anyway, in this course, Jesus claims that he came to do what he calls the atonement, by which he means completing this perception shift. So when you hear the word atonement, he's not talking about a bloody death on the cross, sacrificing himself to an angry God as Christians have interpreted it, but rather at-one-ment, shifting your perception from fear to love. Or basically, atonement in this case could be replaced with the word enlightenment. Enlightenment of the human species, all of us undergoing this consciousness expanding perception shift in which we're lifted out of suffering and we're living in heaven. I'm going to read a few quotes from A Course in Miracles here. The atonement was established as the means of restoring the truth to your mind. In the holy instant, the condition of love is remembered and the atonement becomes clear. Only the complete acceptance of the atonement is salvation. So here it's explaining atonement as enlightenment, a complete shift in perception, and redefining the word salvation from sin and judgment from an angry God to a perception shift in which we experience oneness and love. Here's another passage. The outcome is as certain as God. Salvation is for all, or enlightenment is for all, because the universal plan of the Holy Spirit is all-encompassing. It is an inevitability that all people will come to understand the truth in time. And why is that? I have already said that only one mind is needed to complete the atonement. I stand at the end of the atonement, I meaning Jesus, to give you the gift of the completed atonement. The chain of miscreation has been broken. My part in the atonement is not complete until you join it and give it away. What the Course seems to be saying is that Jesus was an enlightened being who came and lived a perfectly self-realized life. And because he did this, he opened the doorway to make it inevitable that all of us would follow in his footsteps. This makes sense when we pair it together with the near-death experiencers who have seen Jesus, and Jesus has told them, basically, stop waiting on me to come and make things right. You go back and love the person that you're with, and when you do that, love will take over the world. Because this process is already in motion. All it took was one person to become enlightened. And that makes it inevitable that the rest of us will follow suit. All it takes is one person to perform one simple, loving action to ensure that every person in the world experiences the results of that. Now I want to share the final piece of the puzzle as to why it only takes one person. Recently, I was interviewing Lynn McTaggart, who is known for running intention experiments, where she gets 8 people together to intend for each other's needs, whatever they may be. It could be healing, it could be financial, it could be relationships, whatever it may be. They get together and they intend and visualize for that person's needs to be met. And they've intended for things as big as peace in certain parts of the world that were experiencing heavy conflict. They've intended for crime to go down in the highest crime city in the US. She's done multiple of these experiments and seeing real, tangible results. Now, when I questioned Lynn about the process, she said that the size of the group does not matter. Getting more people together to intend, pray, whatever word you want to put on it, doesn't make a difference. But I hear all the time in spiritual circles that talk about the shift in consciousness we're going through right now, that we need to have a critical mass of people who have reached a higher level of consciousness, who are living in love-based consciousness before we'll have a real effect on the world. So I asked Lynn about this as well, and she said, no, that's actually not accurate in her experience. Here's what she had to say. I've heard a lot in the context of the awakening and healing of humanity on a global level, that we need to reach a critical mass of people who are awakened, intending for this, or whatever the terminology may be. Do you think that's true? Is there a critical mass of people that we need to get meditating and intending together for world peace, or could just one small group be enough?
A guy called Nicholas, who is a sociologist at Harvard, did a really interesting study looking at social networks and the spread of certain behavior. He found that happy people are more likely to have happy friends, not because they self-select happy people to be with, but because of the natural spread of happiness. He found this with negative emotions too. Lonely people are more likely to have lonely friends because of the natural spread of loneliness, as are obese people. They're more likely to have obese friends because they reset what is normal. So we are very contagious. But we're also contagious with good deeds. So what he found is a good deed, a kindness, goes 3 degrees down a social network. So if Peter is kind to Paul, Paul is more likely to be kind to Jim. Jim is more likely to be kind to Sarah, who's more likely to be kind to Bob. And each of them continue to be kind as well. So I started calculating this. The last time we did an intention experiment of any size was 30,000 who joined in with a peace for Gaza and Israel. What is interesting is starting to look at the number, let's say 150 people that each person participating in my intention experiment has. Each of them have social network of about 150 people. That will ripple down to a social network so that they will reach half the population of Israel. If they know 600 people, that will ripple around the world to essentially 7 billion people, believe it or not. They know 600 people each, and that is the latest estimate because of all of our social media and social network connections. That Columbia University said everybody knows 600 people. That's the case. That one little intention experiment could reach right around the world. That's why you don't need a critical mass. You already have a critical mass when you have a small group, even a group of 30,000.
Oh, wow. Okay, that just completely shifted my perspective. When you're talking about how happiness is contagious, etc., and how one person with a loving intention knows 600 people, so that affects the 600 people. Can that intention be transferred through consciousness if they're not directly interacting with each of those 600 people? Just does the shift in their consciousness have an effect?
Well, yeah, that's why it multiplies. If you're kind to someone else, they're more likely to be kind to someone else. So if you are loving and sending loving intention to end violence and to come together, they're more likely to be affected and more likely to affect. So it's a contagion of goodwill.
If you have one person, you have a critical mass because one person affects 600 and those 600 each affects 600 more. And so with one person, you've already affected the entire planet. The ripple effect cannot be stopped. But what about all the people who are living in a state of fear and performing evil actions or rude actions or just actions from a low state of consciousness? Isn't there a lot more of those actions being performed in the world? And don't those actions have a ripple effect as well? Well, yes, those actions do have a ripple effect. However, those actions are not as powerful. Actions performed out of a constricted, lowered, selfish state of consciousness are not as powerful as actions performed out of an expanded, elevated state of consciousness. The reason why? Because the loving actions are expanded. They take up a lot more space. They hold a lot more weight on an energetic level. David Hawkins, a nationally renowned psychiatrist, physician, researcher, spiritual teacher, and lecturer, created what he called a scale of consciousness, the Hawkins scale of consciousness, where he laid out the levels of spiritual evolution that people go through as they ascend toward enlightenment. I don't think I can put a picture on the screen because I'm pretty sure it's copyrighted, so I will try to explain it simply here. The lowest level, which he places at the number 20, is shame. The next level at the number 30 is guilt, followed by apathy at 50, grief at 75, fear at 100, desire at 125, anger at 150, pride at 175, courage at 200, neutrality at 250, willingness at 310, acceptance at 350, reason at 400, love at 500, joy at 540, peace at 600, and enlightenment from 700 to 1,000. Hawkins argued that consciousness is quantifiable and measurable energetically in nature, and he created this scale of consciousness through muscle testing. The levels below 200, he called the energy of destruction associated with suffering, fear, and separation. And then the levels above 200, he called the energy of empowerment, constructive energy moving towards love, joy, peace, and ultimately enlightenment. But the interesting thing about the scale of consciousness is that David Hawkins discovered that the higher up in the scale of consciousness you go, the more weight or expansiveness or space or influence in the collective consciousness you have. So for instance, one person vibrating at the level of love, a 500 level, counterbalances the negativity of 750,000 people below 200 in the destructive energy. That's huge. But if we talk about a being like Jesus, a fully enlightened being at the 700 to 1,000 level, his energy would have counterbalanced a minimum of 70 million people below the 200 level, which is why one person reaching enlightenment is enough to counterbalance the world, to save the world. That's why Jesus could call himself a savior, in my opinion, because he was at the consciousness level where he could burn off the karma of millions of people. And then if those millions of people had their karma burned off, according to Lynn McTaggart, everyone else that they're in contact with that's on the other end of their ripple effect will ultimately get their karma burned off too. So it's inevitable that one person reaching enlightenment is enough for the entire world. And we don't even have to take it that far. We can go back to what Jesus said to Howard Storm. One person performing an act of love and kindness has the critical mass because that act of love is coming out of a 500 level of consciousness. One act of love is enough to counteract negative acts from 750 million people. And then if that act of love influences 600 more people, like Lynn McTaggart said, to perform their own acts of love, then how many millions of people, billions, are going to be affected by that one act of love? One act of love is powerful enough to affect the entire world. And that's how the metaphysics of spirituality work. An act of love and kindness performed from a desire to simply be of service and participate in the joy of giving is enough to change the world. You have within your hands right now the power to change the entire world. What will you do with that power? I would love to have you join with me in performing one intentional act of love and service per day leading up into the holidays this year. How much of a difference could we make over the next couple of months if all of us who watch this video make an intentional effort to perform one genuine act of love and service every day for no other reason than to just contribute to the joy of the collective, the awakening of the collective? Will you join me? The power lies with you. If you were the only person performing a loving act, if the entire rest of the world was lost in destruction and negativity and darkness, and you were the only person awake enough to perform a truly loving act, that one act would be enough to guarantee the enlightenment of the entire world. What will you do with that power? Thank you for watching.